workshop that David's never done before. You're going to see material that's never been presented, and you're going to learn the history of narrative practice and how these ideas formed over this 2-day period. Because I've been given permission to interview David, which he's never done before. You have a brief, typical curriculum vitae. Welcome, everyone. Today to the first section of David Epston sharing histories of the future. We hope to make this available to people that couldn't be here today or in other parts of the world. So thank you for being here and helping this event come together. I want to introduce my longtime friend and colleague, David Epston. If I could have you turn your cell phones off and your seats in a upright locked position. David just got here from very long flights.
Thanks, Walter. Just to outline my first response to Walter's request to do a history was, I'm not dead yet. And histories are for the dead. And so I put it off until about a week ago to even start thinking about it. It wasn't really something, I don't know if you realize this, Walter, but it wasn't really something I wanted to do. And then I was talking to Cheryl White, and she said something to me that is going to sound a bit odd, but if you'll just bear with me, you'll get the point. She calls me Epi, and she goes, Epi, I was telling her about this, Epi, it's really important. I come from, a grain growing area. She's the daughter of a farmer. We have a saying down there that when you get older and you look around about people your own age, you decide that you've got to start thinking about your pallbearers and people who can lift you. And she goes, you should be looking for your pallbearers now. It was a really chastening thought that I should be looking for my pallbearers, but well, that's not such a bad idea, really. And by then I had engaged in a historical project. Matter of fact, a week or two before, my colleague and I, Marcela Polenko, had just submitted a book. We had an acceptance for the book, but the book outline. And we decided to write a different kind of history. I mean, it's, if you know much about historiography, I'm not saying you should, but if you did history in school or at university, you would realize that there are different kinds of history. And one of the very interesting forms of histories are called counterfactual histories. These are histories that didn't happen. So let me just give you an example of one counterfactual history. What would have happened if Hitler knew in 1941 that the RAF, the Royal Air Force, had only 21 more fighters? And instead of starting the land invasion, he withdrew the land invasion. You probably know that the RAF had lots of airplanes all over the place, except that they were made of cardboard. And that fooled the Germans. Okay? So what would have happened to this world? How would our world have been different? So you go, what's that got to do with you and Marcela? Marcela and my project is to reimagine narrative therapy if it was born and bred in the Americas. And for the Americas, don't include North America. That's the term they use. And if it was, what sources, what historical and political currents at about the same period of time in the 70s and 80s would have been drawn upon? So that's the book we're writing. Couldn't be more fascinating, but that's called a counterfactual history. So that freed me from the idea that I had to go and, oh God, I started here and I went there, and then, well, it's sort of what you do when you're at the end of your life. And I don't quite feel I'm there yet. I'm getting closer to it. So then I decided that, well, what history would I be interested in? And I remembered a conversation, or conversations I had with Michael near the end of his life, but I didn't know it was near the end of his life, nor did he. And as you will recall, he had worked 5 or 6 years distilling his practice into a book called Maps. Michael was aware that that book didn't do everything. It actually left out quite a lot. But it served a certain purpose. And I remember talking with him and him saying, or I couldn't remember who said what, is that we needed to start all over again. Because both of us had been captured by certain projects. Me writing with my colleagues, Biting the Hand That Starves You, Inspiring Resistance to Anorexia Nervosa. That took 8 years, and Michael probably took about 5 or 6 years. And when you write a book like that, at a certain point, everyone will know this who's written a thesis or anything, at a certain point you have to stop reading and thinking about anything else to get this done. Would you agree? At a certain point you go, no more reading, nothing more. I don't want an idea, go away. I've got enough, I can't use any more. And Michael and I were going to meet. We planned, and I loaded his computer with all the materials that we were going to proceed to, and I've got some of them here. I'm bringing the same materials because I don't think they've been done yet. We were going to meet 3 weeks after he died to begin this. And as I said, and the last communication I had was, I can't wait to read all this stuff, but I'm still too busy. Okay? So I decided, there's any events could be, any history could be written. But I decided to, the only history that really interested me, and I hope will interest you, is the history of the future. So when I started thinking, well, what is the future? What are the questions that haven't been answered? And Michael, I remember him saying to me, oh gosh, we missed so much. There's so much of even the literature that we were dependent on that we really never developed. There was just too many things going on, too many matters of concern that you couldn't do everything at once. So what I decided to do was to go through and find out what didn't get done, and try to draw your attention to that. And of course it led me to look at stuff I had DVDs I'd never even looked at. And I found them, and they're so interesting. So what my idea for the 2 days is to, Walter has another idea, and we'll work it out together, is to show you show you the moments. And I go, what was the critical moment in which this came to my attention? And if I could find a video or a story, that's what I intend to do. But what I really wanted to do was, first of all, was to introduce the spirit of narrative therapy. It's really one of my most valued documents, and I'll have to explain to you how it came about. I'd interviewed a woman called Margarita Boone in the conference at Oaxaca. She didn't know anything about narrative therapy when she arrived, and just thought it was a nice conference because Oaxaca's not too far from Cancun. And she arrived and she volunteered for an interview. And which was profound for both of us. And then she is a famous scholar. Also, you're going to hear a famous poet, lyricist, and professional singer. And she wrote something very extraordinary, and she's published it in Spanish. Now, some of the things I'm going to talk about, if you write them down, I'll send them to you. But you have to write them down, and you have to send me an email. Okay?
Or give it to me, and I'll collect them and send them to you.
Okay. We'll just put Margarita, will be the note. And what she did was, someone in the audience had written down the questions I asked. And then what she did was explain to me the effects of the question on her. And it changed not only her, but the family she came from, because she circulated amongst her family. Plus, she is a literary scholar, so she had a very interesting way of speaking about things. And what she called it was the most remarkable thing. I mean, she said, restoring the dignity and honor of my family. That's what the interview did. I'd never thought much about dignity and honor. I know those are Latin terms. They're almost always used together. And you'll see later, David Marsden and I use restoring the dignity and honor of families. And that this work has a lot to do with the dignification of the people that we meet. So then I got I ride to work on my bicycle, and I opened my email one day, about 2005, and I get this most charming email. And it, hello, my name is Dr. Ernesto Marzoa. I am opening the door with a welcome to the Association of Psychiatry in Cuba. And I go, I've never been invited anywhere by psychiatrists before. Isn't that interesting? The first invitation comes from Cuba. Anyways, to cut a long story short, because of your government, it took us 2 years to organize and figure out how to hold this conference. The International Federation of Social Work had to sponsor it. The World because it's not dominated by, the CIA, the World Psychiatric Association. Actually, the head of it was a Cuban psychiatrist. We ended up having a conference in Cuba in 2007, and I appealed to Margarita because I knew there would be songs, I knew there would be music, both ways, and I knew that we needed to represent ourselves in song. So I asked Margarita, who I knew by then was a lyricist and composer and songstress, to write a song for us, to represent us to our Cuban brothers and sisters. And this is the song she wrote, and she also wrote it in Cuban rhythm, which is son. So, she went to quite a lot of trouble. And when Michael's memorial service was in Auckland, there were many all over the world, but this was the first thing that was played. Somehow or other, I believe that she, because of the experience she was able to find words for the spirit of narrative therapy. So let me just tell you a little bit what happened after that. When we met together, I was summoned by the 18 directors of social work who were all present at this conference. Obviously, I had a translator. And they said to me, David, you are to come here and you are to train 40,000 social workers, 5,000 at a time. Don't worry about, we can mobilize. You know how they have amazing capacity because of the tornadoes to mobilize people. They can move people really fast. We'll have, you just get here, we'll look after you, but you have to teach 5,000 at a time. We were really intending to do this, and my colleague in New Zealand offered a doctoral place to the president of the social worker, Odillis, who said she could be critical. We had to ask her that. Could she be critical or not? She said, don't worry, I can be critical. But it all fell apart because we couldn't communicate with them. We sent an email and we get a reply 4 months back later. And you can't organize a whole bunch of bilinguals from all over North America and South America to be there when you can only communicate once every 4 months. Mm-hmm. So we haven't, Marcel and I are hoping to go back soon, but that's another story. So I'd like to play you a song. Obviously it's in Spanish, but Margarita translated it for us. Okay?
Podido entender sin tu trino que tiene en tu nombre, que guarda un camino. Deja que lleve conmigo un pedazo de tiempo compartido y el sabor a tibieza que deja el amigo. Hermano de sol y tiempo que importa el color. El viento nos une un sabor, a sueño a mano con mano y sosteniendo un pequeño pedazo, un cachito de mundo donde se permita andar a tu paso, sentir lo que sientes y aunque diferente, cantar con tu canto.
Deja que tome conciencia y me lleve de vuelta la certeza que siendo distintos somos parecidos. El corazón late los mismos latidos, pero que tu forma inventa otro ritmo. Deja que prenda tu canto, enriquezca mi mundo con tu mirada y tenga en tu alma una nueva morada. Hermano de sol, mi tiempo que importa el color del viento nos une un sabor, a sueño, a mano con mano, y sosteniendo un pequeño pedazo, un cachito de mundo donde se permita andar a tu paso, sentir lo que sientes, aunque diferente, cantar con tu canto. Mano con mano, ir sosteniendo un pequeño pedazo, un cachito de mundo donde se permita andar a tu paso, sentir lo que sientes, aunque diferente, cantar con tu canto.
Let me hold your story and fill my hands with new sensations that I've never seen before, which have never existed, which I couldn't have understood without your song. They bear your name and trace out a road. Let me take with me a piece of our time together and savor the warmth the friend leaves behind. Brother of the sun and of time, who cares what color the wind is? We are joined by the taste of a dream. Of being hand in hand, holding a small piece, a bit of a world where you are allowed to walk at your own pace and feel what you feel, and although different, sing your own song. Let me take your conscience and leave taking with me the certainty that although we're different, we're alike. That the heart beats to the same beat, but your form creates a new rhythm. Let me learn your music and enrich my world with the look of your eyes, and to find in your soul a new home. Brother of the sun and of time, who cares what color the wind is? We are joined by the taste of a dream.
You can grab the channel right just here,
Okay.
right here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Here?
Yeah, I think.
We've never done this before. Yes, Walter.
That's a reference to the Great Lebowski. David, I would again like to thank you for this opportunity, and this will be one story of a life of men that has multiple plots. So I know only a bit, but you started with the quote from Margarita Boone, or the other colleague. The what narrative bit is the honor what?
Brought honor and dignity to her family, to her and her family.
Yes. Do you mind if we start there?
Sure.
When you, people who know me here, I'm a little mushy, but when you think of family and your family,
Yeah.
And, what might you want to say about them that would honor them, and how you might continue this practice to honor?
Well, I did write a story about
I remember that.
my father, and I wonder if it wouldn't be a good idea if I just grabbed that and read a little bit from it.
Did you happen to have it with you?
Funny I do.
Dumb like a fox.
I won't read the whole thing, but I had turned 16 and I just got my driver's license. My parents had permitted me to borrow their car that night, and this night just had to be a night to remember. Things were getting pretty serious with Judy. We had had our first kiss on our last date, and now she accepted my invitation to a dance at the Brock Street Hall. Although we had gone to dances at the YMCA, the Brock Street Hall was something altogether different. On Wednesdays, they had pro wrestling with the likes of Bobo Brazil, the Masked Marvel, Gorgeous George, and Tiger Tasker. The rest of the week, service clubs ran bingo evenings to raise funds for charity. On Saturday nights, they had rock and roll dances, and many of those attending weren't high school students. They worked at the Canadian General Electric, and for me, that was a vast, mythical place of transformers and switchgear. Everything in Peterborough depended on the CGE. After over 4,000 employers meant prosperity, anything less meant a downturn. Looking back, I don't remember much about the dance, but what I do recall was what happened afterwards. Judy and I got into my parents' Pontiac and set off down Brock Street. We were being followed closely, but I didn't make anything of it. The traffic lights turned amber as I approached the intersection, but as the streets were icy, I speeded up at the same time, thinking what a well-considered decision I'd made on the spur of the moment. I felt so manly that I was encouraged to put my arm around Judy. I didn't have much time to consider my luck before the car that was following us pulled alongside so I could read Provincial Police emblazoned on its side. I pulled over to the curb. Two sinister figures approached us, one from either side. I rolled down my window, trying to keep my composure. "What'd you go through the red light for, kid?" I summoned up all my courage and started to give my reasons for running the amber. "Shut up, kid. Got a driver's license." I handed over my license, which was examined by torchlight. He then curiously looked at me. All his Mickey Spillane toughness vanished as he politely engaged. "Are you Benny the Peanut Man's boy?" I admitted I was, although I probably would have confessed to almost any allegation. "Look, kid, you didn't go through a green light, and don't let anyone tell you different. Say hello to Benny for us. I'm Jack. Come around here, Jerry, and meet the Peanut Man's boy." We exchanged greetings, and they drove off. This was my first clue to the mystery of my father. A man so self-effacing that I hardly knew him. A man who spoke endlessly to and of others. But let me get back to Benny the Peanut Man. His name was Benjamin, but everyone in Peterborough, both young and old, called him Benny. The Peanut Man was new to me and quite embarrassing. To some extent, my father was always an embarrassment to me. He and my mother ran a lunch bar with 12 round stools that rotated on stainless steel pedestals on one side with peanuts and nuts for sale that he roasted himself on the other side. The store was called the Nuttery, and on the main street right across from the Paramount, one of the 3 movie houses. My father worked on average 70 to 80 hours every week, Monday through Saturday night, so we didn't see him that much. But that just built up our anticipation for Sunday, a day that he devoted to my sister and me. We started the day by joining our parents in their bed for an hour or two of stories, of which my father seemed to have an inexhaustible supply. He would then take us on secret adventures, often accompanied by other neighborhood kids. Our destination was not revealed till the last possible moment. He always insisted that it was to give our mother some peace and quiet, but I distinctly had the impression that he enjoyed our adventures as much as we did. Matters started to get worse, though, when I was a teenager. He suddenly developed what I took to be an extremely irritating habit. By then, I had become a member of a secret intellectual elite at Peterborough Collegiate and Vocational School. We called ourselves the Group of Seven, after an early 20th century avant-garde group of impressionist painters. It was de rigueur in this group to compare IQ scores, which we had learned by infiltrating the school files. As the youngest of this group, I had a hard time keeping up, so I had to redouble my efforts at the Peterborough Library. I realize now that this marked the onset of my father's very irritating habit. He would often come home midday for a nap, as he worked until 10 p.m. every night. It must have been then that he would enter the privacy of my bedroom and read the dust jackets of my library books. And then every opportunity he had, he would dispute the premise of the book in question. It seemed as if he was being disagreeable on purpose, and as I'd never known him to be anything but agreeable, this turn in his character infuriated me. In fact, I became so vengeful that I took to researching our points of disagreement further, and then would submit full 5,000-word essays with lengthy bibliographies proving my point. And often I would say, "Dear Father, this proves you're a fool, your son." He would, after some consideration, remove any of his objections. However, he was unrelenting in his research of my researches, even though I assumed all this was quite beyond him. I became enraged with him at times, as he seemed so insensitive to me and my newfound knowledge. This disrespect was bad enough, but what galled me most was his contrariness. He seemed out to vex me for no apparent reason. Once I got so angry that I kicked him from behind when he left my bedroom. Luckily, I missed him, and he never knew that I had made an attempt. What was so perplexing was that he continued to be so kind, unassuming, and generous to all of his friends at the nunnery. Why was he picking on me all of a sudden? I wasn't to find out for another 10 years, when I had returned from New Zealand to visit Canada. My father seemed to have returned to his old self in relation to me. I reminded him how oppositional he had been, almost to the point of what I took to be irrationality. I was shocked into incoherence when my father apologized, but said, "Son, I did it on purpose." This renewed my old outrage, and I asked why he possibly could and would have caused me such distress. Benny the peanut man replied, "I was so worried about you. You seemed to be so willing to accept other people's ideas. I really wanted you to be able to think for yourself, so that's why I did it. I'm really sorry if I upset you." He seemed so regretful that I was speechless. My mind went blank. It took me another 10 years to figure out the significance of his comments, and by then he had died. So that's how I came to, I was raised in some very unusual ways. For example, my sister and I, my sister was 2 years older, we would sit down at dinner at 8 o'clock. And my parents would tell me about all the people that they knew who came into their store and essentially gave accounts of them that were very honoring and dignifying. And we would then usually get up from the table at 2 in the morning. These stories would go on for 5 or 6 hours, regularly. And I remember in 1983, when I was asked to give a plenary address at the 1983, the third Australian Family Therapy Conference, they give you, when you're given a plenary address, they give you about 8 months to figure it out. You don't get asked just the week. And the topic of the address, what were the influences on your work? And when I started this out, I thought this would be an extremely easy task. After all, what did I have to do? I just had to go back and review every book I'd read, every article I'd read, every supervisor I knew, every workshop I went to, and every video I'd watched. It would be really easy. And I did do all of that, and I finally fell into despair one day. I remember sitting on the settee thinking, I'm going to have to write them and say I can't do it. I don't know what was my influence. And then it just came to me, my father. And then I started realizing that was, that only that time that I realized why he had done all that and who he was. So that's part of the answer to your question.
Yeah, so
Is
this...
that too long an answer?
It's a lovely answer, and
You don't mind if I find stuff? Because I've been working on this.
you give no indication. I've never heard this.
Yeah.
So, through this kind of rigorous
Yeah.
questioning of your assumptions and your
Yeah.
beliefs, and that it steeled you. And it was in the course of, I really wanted you to think for yourself.
Yeah.
And then the second theme is the practice of your father honoring the stories of people's lives who came to the store.
Yeah. And I had an amazing form of supervision. From the age of 11, I was recruited to work at a store, and I washed dishes. And I was a very, very shy, I was a really, really shy kid, and I was a year or two ahead of myself in school, so that made it difficult for me in some ways. And but because my father quite often worked there all by his own, there was a mirror, an angled mirror. You were standing at the dishwasher, and there was an angled mirror, and it allowed you to see it was like a CCTV camera that didn't record. You could see the whole store. And what do you do when you wash dishes? I mean, after the first 1,000 cups, they all look the same. So I would spend all my time watching, like I was behind like a one-way screen, watching my father talk to everybody. And I learned how to ask questions, because that's what he was famous for. I didn't, I just thought that was him, but I realized that he could engage anyone in a conversation. And most of the people that he engaged in conversation, I found out later, were what we would refer to as people with mental health issues or whatever. But they were mainly family friends. These were the people that I heard about every day, what they were doing, what they had become of themselves, how they had become of themselves. So I had a very long tuition in very different versions of people than pathologizing versions. I was trained in it from the first day that I had a consciousness of other people.
And so that is a practice of, you learned from observing your father through the mirror while washing dishes, of asking questions, drawing off people's stories,
Yeah.
and that were, maybe had particular struggles,
Yes,
as family
absolutely.
friends, but in a very comfortable setting of of this store.
Yes, yeah. Well, these people used to hang out there,
Yes, of course.
especially at night.
Yeah, we came to call those drop-in centers later.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, yeah.
So, I just want to get you overseas, if I can.
Mhm.
What got you to New Zealand
What got
from
me-
Canada?
What got me to New Zealand? It was really interesting. And Anne was talking to me, 'cause, we were both reading the review of On the Road, Jack Kerouac's novel, and she said to me, "Did this have any influence on you?" And I remember watching On the Road on TV when I was about 15. Well, this is a good story about my parents too. And I think afterwards I got up and said to my mother and father, "I'm going on the road." And they said, yeah, you are. Anyways, I still had to graduate from high school. I think I had another 2 years to go. And I graduated from high school, and my father comes up to me and he says, "Are you going on the road?" And I go, "Yeah, tomorrow." He goes, "What time?" I go, "Look, don't even, because we'd like to, say goodbye to you." I go, "Don't even worry. I'll be up so early. I'll be gone so early, you won't even see me go." They said, "Okay, fine." And anyways, they said about 8 o'clock, "Do you want some breakfast?" The next night, my mother come in, "When are you going?" And I say the same thing. "Don't, and well, would you, we'd like to, send you out for the good breakfast. You're going wherever. You're going to be riding freight trains and all this stuff, and you need a good breakfast." And I go, "Don't, nuh-uh. I'll get up so early, you won't even see me go." Anyways, and then I won a few scholarships to university, so that, I could go in, it was fine. There was no reason that I should be there. And this went on for about 2 weeks, the same thing. They would come and this day they came in, and there were both of them there, and they said, "When are you going?" And I came up with the same story. Probably the earnestness in which I was telling this story was wearing a bit thin. And they said, "Look, we'll help you pack." And my mother said, "I've got something for you to pack with." And I said, "What's that?" And she had a 50-cent piece. No, a $2 coin, which was kind of rare, but it was, you see one of these once a year. And she says, "This is for good luck." And my father said, "I've got a present for you." And it was a compass. And this is for you to find your way to where you're going and to find your way back. Then they said, "Look, don't worry about getting up early or the breakfast. We're taking you." "You're taking me?" "Yeah, well, you're going to go hitchhiking, aren't you?" And I go, "Yeah." "Well, we'll take you out to the end of the city so you can get a ride." And I remember them picking me off and going, good travels, and the car goes, and I'm just starting to cry. And the next thing, someone picks me up within a minute. This was my salvation. Otherwise, like, what do you do when they come home from work at 5 o'clock and you're there waiting for dinner? It was kind of humiliating for a 16 or 17-year-old boy. And then I was gone, and I was never to return to to see them for about 5 years. And, oh no, I went, and then I met a friend of mine who was my high school friend, and he said, let's go somewhere. And I said, yeah, where? He goes, Australia. And I said, no, New Zealand. Let's go to New Zealand. He goes, okay. So we were in Portland, Oregon. We got on some freight trains, went down to the embassy, the New Zealand embassy. In those days, if anyone wanted to go to New Zealand, they just about fell over backwards. I mean, they're actually in those days paying people to go to New Zealand. It's no longer the case. So we arranged to go to university there and to emigrate. And then I returned home, and we worked for a little while to go back to New Zealand. And is it worth telling the story of how we almost got deported before we even put foot land? Are you interested in these stories? This could go a long time. We were on this tramp steamer that was running up and down the coast of the west coast of the United States, picking up heavy timbers, building timbers. So the boat was loaded with these timbers, and you had all these gangplanks and these huge things, logs about, not logs, but wood, about this big. And we were only 8 passengers, and the rest were crew. And they had been at sea for a long time. They're all New Zealanders. Anyways, I mean, the rest of the passengers were rather elderly people. And so we hung out with the crew. And we come into New Zealand harbor, and it's the middle of summer. But we've got our ordnance on, so we couldn't land because they have to take the ordnance off in the middle of the harbor so you don't blow up the city. And this was Friday night, and so the crew bought out all the booze, and everyone started drinking, and it was Auckland in the summer in the harbor, everyone's on boats waving to us, and we started drinking. And believe it or not, we drank out the boat. And my friend, who was a good swimmer and an able-bodied seaman, decided, and this was how drunk they were, decided they would just swim ashore and get some and swim back. But the problem was that once they hit the water, there was a worst riptide, and I watched him hit the water, and he went like that. He was, very athletic swimmer. Anyways, and also there were shark notices up. The next thing I know, the crew has to go down. They're so drunk they can't get the rescue boat started. Anyways, I fall asleep. And I know this captain comes up to me, and he's going to beat me up. He's virtually going to beat me up. And he says, right, the police are coming, and they're going to deport you to Moore. We're going to put you on a ship back to Canada or to North America. Anyways, when the police interrogated my friend and myself, they realized that we weren't exactly heavy-duty drug smugglers, but just like idiots. And we then did get ashore, and we did gain New Zealand entry. But for a moment there, I thought that my arrival in New Zealand would be my departure.
That is a good drinking story. And then you came and I just want to make sure we're using our time well here. You came to find yourself in anthropology and social work.
Yeah.
And why?
Why? It seemed to be the best way that best discipline to know people in the way that I wanted to know them. And I did do anthropology, and then we didn't have sociology at that time, so I went to University of British Columbia to finish my degree. And then came back and got a lectureship in anthropology when I was like 24. That was really a frightening experience. But I was really looking forward, I remember really looking forward to it because I had the conviction that people who taught at university were the repository of the wisdom of all ages. And I thought, wow, it's going to be really good. I'll go to the staff room and it'll all rub off on me. I'll be hanging out with them. Not that, and pretty soon I will be one of these, elite intellectuals, much as I'd aspired to throughout my life. And I was really chastened. I found out that these people in the staff room were not that much different than the people my parents talked about. They were very similar in every possible way. And that led me soon to abandon anthropology. And I worked for Aboriginal welfare as an anthropologist in Australia. And that was the most chastening experience of all. And but the day I was hired, I started leaving and went to study community development at the University of Edinburgh, thinking this would be a better way to serve. And so that was in 1970 and 71. I went to, and that probably is one of the greatest influences on my work. And also the fact that Michael didn't have a professional qualification in community development, but he himself, his first experiences were, by necessity, with people who were institutionalized in psychiatric hospitals, organizing community endeavors as a response to their disservices in institutions. And the happiest times Michael and I had was going. He would go once a week to Glenside State Hospital. To go there, that was, we couldn't wait to get there too. And Michael had this deal where he found out, it's not that hard to find out, but he found out that a person, when their file weighed a certain amount, which he calculated at 4.4 pounds, he worked it out, they were regarded as non-human, as wastage. And he decided that was a good place for a social work to work because no one bothered you. No elite professional was that concerned about the rubbish in the institution. And that's where he really started the greatest work that he ever did, and the work that I believe meant most to him and evolved into his collective practice, which was Power to Our Journeys group. It was touching to me that there was a representative from the Hearing Voices Network. People know what the Hearing Voices Network is? This is probably the only, I was just reading Tanya Luhrmann. Tanya Luhrmann is a professor of social thought at the University of Chicago. And is probably the most famous anthropologist writing about psychiatric practice in North America. And she also makes a strong point that she's not opposed to psychiatry. Her father's a psychiatrist, but her first book was In Two Minds, and it's a subtext of it. And how she did her study was to become an apprentice. What do you call it? we call it on placement,
Internship.
She did 7 psychiatric internships in the Boston area. I know where it is now because I was talking about this and someone came up to me, was in Boston, they told me. So she would do everything a person could do that that medical ethics wouldn't exclude her. And this is a subtext to the book, and I can reference it. You can find a reference, but what she said was, it is inevitable that if you're trained as a psychiatrist, at least in Boston in the time you would learn to hate people. You could not do this. Anyways, I was just reading something she just published recently. I follow her, and she was saying there's only 2 bright lights in American psychiatry: the recovery movement and the Hearing Voices Network. Hearing Voices Network was started by 2 psychiatrists in Holland. It's really widespread. What the spokesperson for the Hearing Voices Network did a plenary address in Adelaide at the most recent conference, and he spent a great deal of time paying their respects to Michael, for one of the first people in the world to actually respect the voices of those who live in two realities. You're going to see me interviewing someone in regard to this later in South Africa. So that was probably Michael's greatest love, his greatest commitment.
And so you met in Australia
Yeah,
in
1980.
1980. And you stumbled across each other.
Yeah, well, we had met because he was the editor. He was very. I had just gone overseas, to the UK to study, to do a master's in social work. You couldn't do a master's in social work in New Zealand at that time; it didn't exist. But I was also interested in this thing called family therapy. I'd heard about it, and it had some appeal for me as the most radical form of therapy, the first therapy to contest, the long-standing tradition from the late 19th century, the hegemony of psychoanalytic practice, and et cetera, and but Michael had, by 1980, was a highly respected person in Australia, and the first editor of their journal. And the first...
Journal of Marriage and Family Therapy of Australia and New Zealand.
No, it was only called... they didn't know New Zealand existed at the time, and it didn't, in that way. There's no...
Wasn't even on the map, huh?
That was on the map, but it wasn't on the family therapy map. It was the Australian Journal of Family Therapy. And I had submitted a paper, and Michael said to me, let's meet when, at the conference. Are you coming to the conference? Let's meet. I'd love to talk to you. And but I'm a shy person, and every time Michael was there, there'd be, about 15 people all around him. Michael was an extremely shy person himself, but, and I never really, I might have shaken his hand, but that was about it. But it was in 1981 when the conference was in Adelaide, and Michael was one of the organizers, and I was doing a day-long workshop, and there was 4 or 5 competing workshops at any one time. There was maybe 400 or 500 people at this conference, and I was a nobody. And but Michael came up to me and he said, "Oh God, he came, David, can I come to your workshop?" You really can't say no. But I wish I had said no, because that was the last person. I mean, Michael had published widely at this time, profound papers, and But he was there, and it was really interesting because the first, from 9 till tea time, there was about 30 people. And then from tea time, there were 60 people. Then after lunch, there was 130 people. Then after lunch, there was about 450 people at my workshop. And then there was this upset that some people hadn't been there. Would I do it again the next day? Which I did do. I couldn't understand this. But more interestingly was Michael's workshop and what happened there. And Michael's workshop was a workshop about his work in the state mental hospital called Glenside. And it was the first expression of his own practice. I found out that it was only between 1980 and 81 that he started rendering his work in his own theoretical formulations rather than on imported formulations. And he, if you read his, which he then totally renounced, he never reprinted any of those papers. In his book, Selected Papers, mine was collected, his was selected, he removed all the papers that were derivative of other ideas. Not that he wasn't a great proponent of other people's ideas. If you read the papers, they're the best, some of the best papers going. Including his 1977 paper on anorexia, which I've been told by the editor of the then editor of Family Process, it was the first paper in the history of psychotherapy ever to show positive results with anorexia, which almost cost him his job, which I'll explain later. It's an interesting story. So I went to his workshop, and it was called, you could see they always had quaint names. In the Corner Lifestyle, it was called. And I watched this. And remember, I had just come back from 2 years. 1 year, I did a master's, a 12-month master's degree, and the next year I had a placement for a year at the Family Institute of Cardiff, which was the sister organization of the Ackerman Institute in New York, where I watched motion videos so much that I could even, when I met him, I actually could do all the lines, all his lines of an interview with a Welsh couple about, the problem was that they had a disagreement about how thick the porridge should be. And he goes, "You remember that?" And I go, "Well, I watched your video 80 times, I should." Anyways, Michael gave his workshop, and I am not given to these sorts of dramatic moments, a shyer person, but I just felt a compulsion to stand up and to essentially berate everybody. Or not berate's too strong a word, to announce the news. The news was this: everyone here today should be aware that you are a witness to a unique school of family therapy. In fact, I was modest, wasn't I? It actually turned out to be more than that. And Michael came up to me, he was very shy, and goes, "Do you really mean that?" I go, "Of course I do, I really mean it." And he said, "Well, can we go out for dinner?" So, could I meet you? Can we go out for dinner? So that's how we really met. Would you like to hear the story of how having the most successful results in the history of psychotherapy cost him his job, but was the basis of narrative therapy? Okay.
Yeah, let's do that, and then we'll have our
Okay.
first break.
Okay.
Because it's a wonderful
Okay.
turning point.
Michael worked at the Children's Hospital in a department of child psychiatry, and he had a really good colleague who was the psychiatric director, but and this was really embarrassing because at Michael's funeral I told this story and used his name, and he came up afterwards and said, please, next time it wasn't me, it was the assistant director. Because I was overseas, it would have never happened if I was there. Okay, so what happened was, the hospital, the finds that Michael has published the first paper ever written that shows positive results with anorexia. And the assistant director came up to him and said, you cannot see any more clients with anorexia because you're a social worker. Anyone who knew Michael knew that he didn't bend easily. He just kept seeing them. And can you imagine in a city like Adelaide that someone knew that someone could work successfully with anorexia? In those days, that would be like someone over there has a cure for, cancer. There'd be a fair lineup there, wouldn't there? Would you agree? Yeah. Anyways, so the the director, assistant director, thought that he would do he stole all Michael's chairs. That didn't stop Michael and the family. They all sat on the floor. So I guess I'm pretty sure that he then went and got some legal advice about how to fire someone. It would be like, how would you fire the guy who just got the most successful results in the world? I mean, that's not going to be easy, is it? You could say he's too successful. I guess I need to fire him because he's over successful. I don't think that would really pass any employment court. So what he did, and what everyone does, is you give the person dirty work, right? You assign them a job that sooner or later they are going to get so sick of that they resign. Well, guess what the dirty job was? It was pretty dirty. Michael was assigned to be only allowed to see young people who had failed, not even succeed, not even that they had the problem, they had to have failed a 2-year-long psychoanalytic treatment for soiling. For what you say? Soiling and caprices. Dirty job. If you be around people who are soil a lot, you stink, right? Michael did tell me in private, and he's no longer here, so I can break the secret. He met 100 cases. He was successful on 99 with an average of 4 sessions. But what did he invent within this? Externalizing the problem. I never talked to Michael about it, about how that happened. Cheryl and I have tried to track down some of the colleagues that he worked with. No one can really tell us very much about like the first externalization or whatever. So we really don't know how it happened. So, and then Michael published that paper, Pseudo in Caprices. It's the most. If you're only going to read 2 papers, read that one and Externalizing the Problem. I'm sure you should read a lot more. But those were 2 of the, the basic papers. And the other one is Process of Questioning in 1988. Have I said enough?
Well, just, we don't do active listening here, we do super active listening. I think so.
You've got a question?
I do. I just want to ask if you would repeat the Pseudo in Caprices paper and another paper that you said.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what we'll do is,
I
at the break, we'll write out these on the
Okay.
board and we'll make sure that we'll have a list.
Well,
Because a lot is being referenced.
why don't even make it easier? Like,
Yeah, I'm taking notes.
Walter will take notes, I'll get the references, some of them I've got PDFs, and we'll make them available to you. Instead of you
Thank
doing
you.
one at a time and everyone sending me, and we'll just put together a package.
And I knew this would be rich, but it is a treasure trove. And so we're going to try to collect all the coins we can that are collected, and then send them off to all the participants here. So you'll be able to refer to them at your leisure, and then open up the case when needed. Thank you very much for part one, David.
You're welcome.
15-minute break, get back about 5 to 11.